And welcome to the Midday Show. I am Jeff Everett. He is Mark Messina. It's a hard Monday. Teaching is hard. They're trying to make it easier. Pennsylvania's waiving basic skill requirements. I have many thoughts on that. Acting is hard. I want to talk about the difficulties of being an extra that not everyone considers.
I'm curious to hear your comment during that section.
Thank you. Acting is hard. And coaching. Coaching is hard. We're going to hash out the weekend of football, maybe at the local level, the collegiate level, the professional level. We're going to dive into that at the end of the show and have a little bit of fun. On this hard Monday, Mark, how are you feeling today?
Well, hold on. Let me stretch here. The Cowboys won. Oh, hold on. Let me fix my background a little bit here. Oh, look at that.
Oh, wow.
Look at that. We are back.
It's almost like you had that planned.
I just thought of it like 10 seconds before we went on the air. Can we see that?
Yeah,
Cooper Rush, obviously the greatest football player to ever live. And thankfully he's with us. And Dak is on the trade block all of a sudden with his $8 bajillion contract. We might never lose again.
We will talk about Cooper Rush at the end of the show.
Before we get into your hard topics, I do want to mention this. Obviously, the passing of a loved one is always hard.
Mm-hmm.
Prince Andrew, who is I don't really mean to make light of this, but the youngest son of Queen Elizabeth, said his mother's passing has, quote, left an unimaginable void in all of our lives.
Okay.
All I can think, my first thought is the woman was 96.
Mm.
Like, I get it, but there's also a point where maybe I'm just playing the role of cold, heartless Jeff.
No,
I don't get it. She lived to be 96.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't unimaginable. You probably should have been imagining for a decade or two that, like, pretty soon Queen Elizabeth, she's not going to live forever.
Yeah.
At 96, is it unimaginable?
Okay. There is because I've really thought hard about this because of what's going on in our country and just how people there's people that hate Biden, there's people that hate Trump, and it's just like leadership right now has maybe never been less valued maybe in our country's history. Is that a fair way of putting it?
Okay.
Okay. The way people over there are just so enamored in the respect for the quote unquote, the leadership, the crown. 50% of me is like, wow, like it looks really great. I can't imagine what it must be like to live in a society where like something like that is so highly thought of and so valued that even if you don't always agree with the choices that are made, you respect the concept of the crown like that, right? So 50% of me is like, the other 50% of me is kind of like, I feel like we've been doing this now for 2 weeks. I'm not implying it's lunacy or that people can't grieve or people can't. I mean, like you said, like 96, just the idea, maybe it's just very American of me to struggle the idea of worshiping the crown. Like that was always kind of my biggest thing about like someone who was super Trump or super Biden is just like people act like it's the crown and it's like Trump's word is the gospel or like you have to Biden's and it's like, well, no. So I don't know. I'm 50-50 with you. Yes, there is a side to some of the stuff right now. She died, 2 weeks ago?
I think, wasn't it the 3rd?
But see, this is what some people...
Yes, it's been a while.
Yes, but this is what some people say, is they will say that's the 96 is what she almost attained this level of like, it was never going to end. Like it was
get it.
So there's some of that to it as well.
And maybe maybe she was as sharp as ever. I just don't, at 96, I like...
Your point is
what role is she still playing in your life at 96?
Your point is like at 96, if this was unimaginable, then you
lack imagination.
Probably, maybe, yes. That might be the way to put it.
I mean, you're bracing for it. And I get, I understand, like, I guess the closest comparison I could have is when my grandmother died and she was either 89 or she was within a week or two of her 89th birthday. I don't remember if she got to it or not. But like And I had a lifetime of memories of my grandmother. She's very active in my life, but she was in a nursing home. She, had her hearing was mostly gone, and it was sad, and it brought back all these things. And there's a point of view like, wow, it's weird that she's never going to be at the family dinner, but it wasn't unimaginable. She was 89.
I think the hardest thing at like anybody who has to speak at a funeral or anybody who has to speak on, the behalf of the dead or anything like that, when you're talking about somebody that was so important to you or to other people, I think the hardest thing to do is avoid hyperbole, because it's emotional, and this could be it. Like, you're trying to sum up the entirety of someone's life.
Right.
And so you tend to fall into this trap of hyperbole of like, it was all the greatest and it was all the best. And he certainly, with that quote, I think he fell into the trap.
You're probably
right. Of that hyperbole.
All right. So anyway, back to, you tell me why today's hard.
That just, well, listen, Mondays are hard. I think for most people, Mondays are hard. Not everybody loves a Monday. Teaching is hard. Acting is hard. Coaching is hard. Let's start with teaching. Pennsylvania decided that they are going to waive the basic skills requirement for educators. And the goal here is to actually attract more educators. At least for the next 3 years, according to the Philadelphia Inquirer, Pennsylvania students will no longer have to pass the so-called basic skills tests in reading, math, and writing to meet the requirements to teach. So I had to do these. I don't know if they existed when you went through. Did you have to do the basic skills?
Is that the same thing as the national teacher exams, the NTEs?
I don't know. I'm assuming
I had to take those.
Okay, I'm assuming they were similar, because I believe the basic skills exam for Pennsylvania was like 2000. I think they introduced it officially like in the 2000s. So like they moved from whatever you had to take into this.
But someday when we have nothing to talk about, I will talk to you about my math portion of the NTEs and how I lit them up. Okay. And I will give you my strategy. But anyway, that's for another day when we have nothing to talk about.
So at least for the next 3 years, students will no longer have to pass these tests or meet the requirement to enroll in a teacher preparation program. Facing a teacher shortage crisis, the state legislature in June agreed to waive the requirement, giving officials a chance to study whether the test really improved the quality of teaching candidates or just deterred students from pursuing the profession. A lot of different ways I want to go about this. This is where I want to start.
Go ahead.
To me, I think it's really oblivious for state legislators to think that the reason the state is losing out on teachers is because of one skills requirement test at the beginning of the program. It couldn't possibly be the inflation of administrations. It couldn't possibly be the overwhelming amount of standardized testing forced on by the state. It couldn't possibly be wages not raised. It has to be this one requirements test that every once in a while somebody fails or doesn't want to take again. To me, is very oblivious to the actual problem at hand.
I agree with that point 100%.
Okay, so glad we got. So
where do you want to go next?
So we agree, and we're gonna move on from that. Here's my next question to you. Basic skills requirement, because I have said to you before, I think it's ridiculous that teachers have to go back to attain another degree. I think that's absurd. So I have usually been pro getting rid of requirements. I think it is absurd what teachers have to do to teach. Mm-hmm. However, if you would have said to me, if you said rank the things that teachers have to do, this would have probably been at the end of it. Because a basic skills requirement, to me, it sounds like we have a teacher shortage. What is one of the easier ways to get more people to be teachers? We will dumb down the most basic requirement to become a teacher. So okay. I'm all for teachers not having to deal with standardized testing. I'm all for teachers not having to go back to college. I'm all for teachers making more money. The one thing I'm not for is teachers who can't or won't take the time to figure out how to pass the most basic skills requirement test that there is to become a teacher. So to me, it's the dumbing down. The solution to getting more teachers is to dumb down the basic requirement.
Does it work at all? It's going to be interesting. Does this attract more teachers? Because you're right. Were there people out there that say, I really want to be a teacher, but I can't pass the test?
And I know there
So
are
I'm not-
people who struggle. There's people with anxieties. There's people who aren't great test takers. Like, I'm very willing to admit I wasn't a great test taker. Like, they're out there. But like, this is the basics of the basics. Like, this is, if anyone who has taken it before, I'm not implying the test is easy. What I'm implying though are like, they are the basics of what you would want your educators to know.
Well, here's where I would play devil's advocate.
Okay.
As we've talked about, traditional education needs to change because it's not, you can be I don't think there's ever been a time in the world where you could be more successful in life without a college degree than now.
Yes,
And
I agree with you.
there was that era where it was like you either went to college, you went to the military, or what the hell are you doing with your life?
Sure.
And nowadays we're like, hey, we got kids that you want to go to trade school. You want to be a plumber, electrician, a carpenter, whatever. God bless you. You're more valuable than somebody that gets a psychology degree or sociology degree or whatever. I think it would be interesting to bring in people most, like, you're not a math person. You're an English person.
My degree was in English, yes.
But you know enough math to teach middle school math.
I know enough math that if I had to like do grades, I could do them.
Well, you could teach with a little instruction, with the book and with the teacher's edition book. You could teach middle school
grade
math.
school math, middle school math with some help. Sure, I get your point.
It's so much of it is about attitude, environment, what the personality that the teacher brings to the classroom, how much you engage with the kids. And there are lots of people who know the material inside and out who can't get it across. Like I said, that the smartest high school science teacher might be the worst choice to teach middle school science.
Sure.
Because they might just not be able to do it. So, you may not want to take a professional Aaron Judge may not be the right kid to coach your Little League team.
Sure.
So there is that aspect to it. So I'm interested to see the irony of it is that the people who are about education are now dropping education requirements to get people into education.
Correct.
So are they then looking in the mirror and say, well, maybe all the things that we're doing, maybe we're not all doing this right? But I'm curious to see how people who aren't like born and bred into education, do they get the point across better in certain ways than other people who didn't?
The key word that you said, and you lost me, was mirror. Because as soon as you said mirror, the irony to that, though, is like, I think a lot of what has happened is what a teacher has to do in a day, or what they're expected, or what they have to teach to, has all come from above. So it's all come from the administration. Well, why does it come from the administration? Because it comes from the state. And so, like you say, like they're looking in the mirror and saying, but to me, they're not. Because to me, they're looking at this test as like, well, it couldn't possibly be us. Like, it couldn't possibly be these other things that we have enforced onto the school districts and onto the teachers. So maybe it's this test. So in a weird way, I feel like like they're looking at the test in the mirror and saying, like, it might be this one thing. But to me, they're not really looking in the mirror.
No, and I agree with that. The other aspect, too, is as you talk about the administrators in the state, and how many of these people were ever in the classroom or have been in the classroom recently, because it would be fascinating. I had an accounting class when I was in college, and one of the things, the accounting professor had been in industry before. He had been I don't know if he was the CFO, but he had worked, and then he'd made money, and he always wanted to go back and be a professor and blah, blah, blah. But he said you'd be shocked at how many bigwigs in industry won't listen to the people on the factory floor.
Right.
When the people on the factory floor, not only do they know how everything runs, but they know how it runs more efficiently. They know like things that you can do. And to give a terrible example, I remember when we owned a sub shop and we had set up the cooler thing where all the lettuce and the tomatoes, the place at Subway where you see where all the stuff is. And one day I came in and some high school girl had it all set up differently.
Yeah.
And I was like, what are you doing? She goes, it works better this way. And I just sat there and looked at it and I was like, well, you're the one that's making the sandwiches. So like, what do I care? And if it works better for you, but how often, and it would be fascinating to find, and I'm not talking about a teacher who's been there 3 years or 5 years.
Yeah.
Teachers who've been there 15, 20, 25 years, and how many times that the administrators who sit in their offices who deal with kids way less will tell the teachers, this is what you should do in your classroom, when the teachers are dealing with 100+ kids every day and the administrators are dealing with meetings.
Sure.
And then you've got the administrators who are taking orders from Harrisburg,
Right.
who, and that to me is probably the biggest issue with education.
Sure.
Just like it is in many other industries where the bigwigs don't listen to the factory floor.
Yeah, no, it's a great analogy. I want to read these numbers to you, and then I want to ask you a question based off of these numbers. And 2019, 2020, just 5,500 people completed the education programs. That is down 53% from 2011 to 2012. Okay?
So in a decade,
it
dropped
it's
53%.
down 50%. Okay. The number of in-state this is all in-state numbers.
Pennsylvania.
Yes. The number of in-state graduates who then go on to get their certification is even more startling. They were just 5,400 in 2021. According to the state education department, that is down from 15,031 in 2011, 2012.
So from 15,000 to 5,000.
Essentially, yes, is the basic numbers.
So that's a drop of 67%.
Correct. So you have a drop of 53 and 67%, give or take, in people who enrolled in the program and then people who got their certification from the program. What percentage of that do you think is because of the basic skills requirement test? And so like
1%.
So this is like, they give these numbers and they say, this is why we're going to try this. And here are the numbers. But like, there's no way the basic skills requirement is like, is that 1% of that? Is that 2%? There's no way that is I refuse to believe it's a double-digit percentage. I refuse to believe that it is in any part the real reason those numbers reflected are what they are. Is the basic skills requirement test for people to get.
No, I get it. I would be fascinated.
Wild.
I would be fascinated to go to multiple districts because they're all different, but they're all the same. Mm. And when you sit down, if you went into the students, and we'll say old enough that the kids have a clue, middle school, high school, and you ask, who are the good teachers? You will hear the same names over and over and over.
Okay.
And if you went to those good teachers, the people who are, and you ask them what's different about education,
right? What's
wrong? What would you change about it?
Right.
You ask them who are the bad teachers in the school, and the same names keep coming up.
Sure.
How many people in their own administration, and how many people above are coming to these people and saying, like, what are we doing wrong? What should we do differently?
Totally.
It's like when you get to a professional level, it would be like Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers coming off the field after a series and the offensive coordinator not caring what they say. Mm-hmm. And
no, I'm with you. Pennsylvania isn't alone. There are 13 states that now require the assessment, down from 25. So it's almost been cut in half since 2015 of how many states actually apply these. New Jersey is also considered dumping it as well. And again, they're doing a 3-year test. And the answers they're trying to decide are, does the basic skills requirement lead to better teachers? And will this lead to more teachers enrolling into the program? I don't think you need 3 years.
3 weeks?
3 phone calls?
Right.
Just ask teachers, ask kids that are enrolling into teachers, kids who want to be teachers and it has nothing to do with the skills requirement test. They want to help kids. They want to be in a classroom. They had a great school experience.
What else?
What do you want me to say? They want to coach?
Nope.
What else do you want me to say?
Keep going.
I have nothing more.
What are the best 3 things about teaching?
About teaching? Summer's off.
June, July, and August.
June, July, and August. That's what they want. But people who want to be teachers have a different, I just can't, they like school. Here's the other thing too. Most people that want to be teachers, I'm not saying they like tests, but most
are
good at them. Not everybody. Like I said, right from the beginning, I said there's people who have anxieties and people who struggle. However, most people had a good school experience. They want to be good at it. They like taking tests, or they're good at taking tests, or they are willing to work to pass a test. I just don't, 3 years to figure it out. I don't know.
No, I'm with you. I think they should sit down with and again, it's not measurable. Like you go to a sporting event, you can tell who the best football players are, who the best wrestlers are, the best track people are, just because that's the way sports are.
Right.
In education, it's not so cut and dry. That's why you kind of have to get into the community and say, who are the best teachers at your high school, at your middle school, at your elementary school. But then once you have a good grasp of that, ask the teachers what do they think makes them good teachers. Ask the kids what makes them good teachers, and then try to expand that into, because it's not just knowledge of the material. Again, Aaron Judge is not the best. I will say this, and I say this boldly, and I like Cal. I really like. I worked at a camp that was run by Cal Ripken, a baseball camp. And if your kid was with the 7 and 8 year olds, they wanted to meet Cal Ripken because he was a star.
Right.
But the person who coached the 7 and 8 year olds better between me and this Hall of Famer was me. Because I was sillier. I understood more. You couldn't teach the kids in this, just even like language of, because I said something to the batters, and he even said to me, well, that's not really what it's like, but you get it. Like they don't. Right. He's 7. Like, and it's that aspect. Your ability to teach is there. You have to have a knowledge of the base, but in elementary education, most adults are smart enough to of the subject matter. We can teach the alphabet. We can teach it's, can you teach it to an 8-year-old or to a 9-year-old or to a 10-year-old? And that's where the specialization comes in, with the psychology of being able to adapt. So we need to talk to these people and be like, what do you do? What works for you? How can you help these other young teachers? As opposed to pretending that an administrator can help a young teacher better than a teacher who's been doing it 20 some years, and the successful ones. And then with tenure, you also know, like, when you have a young teacher, you don't want them to talk to this teacher at all because this teacher was terrible. But this teacher's good. This teacher gets it. So you help mentor the young ones. Don't have the administrators do it, because the administrators aren't in the classroom. So anyway, but what do I know?
Teaching is hard. We know that teaching is hard. We're finding out.
You know what? I would say, just like everything, teaching well is hard. Yeah. There's lots of people that show up and just like get their check.
Yeah. If you're proactively trying, it's hard.
Yes. It is hard to be good.
Acting is also hard, as we found out this past week.
Have at it, kid.
The show that I'm going to try to tiptoe around some of this. So the most popular show in the world, whether anyone wants to admit it or not, is Game of Thrones.
You always look at me when you say this.
Because you don't like Game of Thrones, but
there are dragons.
I understand that, but you need to still understand that it is the most popular show in the world. Like, it would be like someone saying I don't like Seinfeld and not being willing to admit that the number one show on cable was Seinfeld. Like, it is what it is. Like, even if you
I get
like
it.
Yeah.
I get it. I don't get it.
So Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon has recently came out. There was an episode that aired last week, and there was a scene in a brothel.
Oh, this is from the new version.
Yes.
Oh, I think because you said the girl grew out of it. I thought it was old.
So in the new show, hold on real quick. So brothel scene last week, right?
Okay.
Which you can imagine what happens in a brothel scene.
Gotcha.
Obviously, not just the characters that you're focusing on. The background of the scene must also have performances being displayed as well.
Very well said.
In this case, the setting was a brothel. So, moving forward to this week, this actress is going to now phase out of her character because the character is getting too old.
Okay.
Like, it's a time jump. So, going through this week, everyone knew it was going to be her last episode. Lots of interviews, lots of conversations. She was all over social media. In one of the interviews on social media, they asked her about her scene in the brothel as a younger actress. Kind of just, not so much was it awkward, but just what were the challenges being a younger actress and knowing the role.
And was it awkward?
Yes, and was it awkward? And she said one of the things that she hinted at was, I didn't feel as awkward as I did for the people, the extras in the background. And she went on to explain that these extras...
What did she explain, actually?
Were playing the part of a brothel for up to 12 hours. Now, on and off, but essentially that for 12 hours, these people had to get into the poses, perform the displays of a brothel, and they did this for 12 hours on set, not straight through, but on and off. And to me, I'm not saying it's abuse.
Brothel scene, take 22.
Yeah.
And action.
Can you, So these are the things, like, to me, when I heard this, and I had watched the scene, like, I know the scene that she was
so you
talking
had
about.
seen it before.
Yes.
Okay, so you're in a better place.
So she put me into, because most, like, when you're watching this stuff, you don't think about the fact that sometimes they do this 30, 40, 50 times. That's why it's so incredible, like in action scenes, like when they wreck a car and they've got one shot.
They got to get it.
Right. But if you're doing a brothel scene, there's no one shot. Like, you're kind of, you're going to do it as many times as it takes, as many, sets as you need to do. So essentially, I started thinking to myself, knowing what people were doing in that scene, it had to be one of the hardest performances ever done, no pun intended, ever done in acting. To perform these things for 12 hours on and off. And again, like, you didn't see the scene. I did.
I'm with you.
But you have people hanging upside down. I mean, you have people all around the room, and they are performing. They are performing this. And here's this. She didn't say how many takes it took, but in 12 hours, I mean, a couple dozen. I mean, if you're there for 12 hours doing just this one set, this one scene, I mean, they had to have done it dozens and dozens of times.
Well, there are different camera angles. There's close-ups, so they weren't. Because when I was on, I do get it, and it seems redundant, and it is. When I was on a movie set, if you've never been there, by the time they get the lighting set and the camera angle set, and they make sure, like, for example, one scene was in a bar. And there was this humming noise, and they couldn't figure out and it was like the underbar refrigerator. But it took them like 15 minutes because they thought everything was unplugged. And is it the air conditioner? What is making that noise? Okay. So they go, once they get everything perfect and they get everything set up and the lighting's good and the microphones are good and all this stuff, and honest to God, they do this line. Then they ad-lib it. Then they say, like, what would you say if you were in this line?
Right.
There was one that the director, right hand of God, said, cut, that was perfect. Let's do it one more time. And as a normal person, I'm saying, you just said it was perfect.
Right.
Why are we doing it again? Because it took 45 minutes to set everything up.
Right.
What's 2.5 more minutes to shoot it again?
Totally.
So they probably like, hey, just in case. And who knows? Like, they're not looking. Maybe there's something wrong with the camera. Maybe the film. Well, like, once we have everybody here and hanging upside down, we're going to take so many shots that we're sure we have it.
And it's not, this was the other thing that went through my mind too, because of just where we are with television series, it's not like there's never a stage setup. Everything is like the full 360, like you're in it and there's something going on. And the camera's moving and it's circular. And so every time they're doing this, like what you just described, there is no like, hey, everyone to the north, like, you're good. Like, it is, they're doing it every single time. So it's just wild to me. I mean, that is...
It made you want to be an extra.
It didn't. But what it did make me think was, there's no way what they're doing wasn't harder than what the actual performers were doing.
Oh,
no
absolutely.
Way. No chance. I think it might have been the hardest acting job in the history of acting.
I mean, there's some that have to be cold and wet. And
well, that was
I can only imagine some like war scenes. Someone that
I read mentioned, because of the setting of that scene, because now this is like a topic of conversation, obviously, like 12 hours doing a brothel scene and you're an extra. They were saying because of the enclosed environment of the brothel, there's no way they had fans on, because like what you were describing, like just with the sounds and everything else and the boom mics and all. So they're essentially saying that like the majority of this time that you are doing these things, there's no way that there's AC, there's no way that there's actual fans running, nothing. So it is just you in a deep, dark brothel in like 17th century whatever,
Which we
And
can all relate to.
Just for 12 hours, like knocking out these scenes and these poses and these actions. Wild. I don't know. I just can't wrap my head around it.
There has never been
clearly this actress can't either, because she's still talking about it, and they did it a year ago. So
there has never been a better promo for what's this called?
House of the Dragon.
House of the Dragon than you just gave.
You think
because
so?
Everyone, even the people like me who've never seen an episode, are going to find the brothel episode. That's all I'm Googling. Brothel episode, House of the Dragon.
There's so many things. I know you can't get past the fact that there's dragons, and I get that, and I don't need to talk you into it because it's the #1 show, and so I don't need to.
Because you're right and I'm wrong.
I don't need to talk you into it. However, the politics, the relationships, the dialogue in these shows, it's the best dramas that's ever been made.
I've had multiple people just rave about how good it is.
I don't even care that there's dragons. Like half the time, the dragon is like thing number 30 I remember about the show. There you go. So anyway, acting is hard.
Well, when you've got people hanging upside down in a brothel, who needs dragons?
You know what's hard also? Coaching is also hard. Obviously, we try to wrap up the weekends now with football going on. I said to you, and there's a lot of different ones to talk about. Obviously, there was the Vegas loss we could talk about. There was also the Miami-Baltimore loss. There was the Jets and who did the Browns?
The Browns, the Ravens, and Vegas are battling for who had the biggest choke job.
I'm blown away because I said to you before the show started, I think play calling is really hard. I think it's maybe the most underrated aspect of football. Is I think if you actually gave people who think they know football a headset and said, like, go ahead and try to run this possession, they would find out very quickly that 30 seconds flies by and that, like, making a choice and trying to make all the reads is difficult. However, I am still blown away at, like, the lack of understanding of just timing, strategy, clock. Like, to this day, it blows my mind that NFL teams just mismanage it so often. When this is like, I don't want to say it's the one thing you can control, but it is like, there's a reason you have 12 other people doing all the other things. It's so that you can know, like, when there's a minute to go, these are the things that matter the most, and I have to control them. And very rarely are people good at it.
Do you know why?
Go ahead.
You'd like me to tell you why?
I
will tell you why.
I'm waiting.
Because these people spend so many hours and hours and hours watching game film. For those of us people who are football fans like I am, so I go to a high school game on Friday night. Who played Thursday night? Yes, I watched the game Thursday night because it was a good one. I don't always watch the Thursday night game depending on how bad it is. But I watch the Thursday night game. I go to a football game Friday night. On Saturday, I usually watch, a game or two. I was at a wedding this weekend, so I saw less. Sunday, I saw, I think, all of the Steeler game, a little bit of the Cowboy game. Then I had to go, and then I saw a lot of the last game. Because when you are watching a bunch of football, and tonight I have two to choose from. What a great Monday night. I got two Monday night football games. You're watching, so I'm playing out the clock management in my head all the time. I watch more football games than Andy Reid does.
You think you do?
Yes, because Andy Reid is watching game film, and he doesn't care about the clock. He doesn't care about.
But see, that's so ironic.
He cares about X's and O's.
That's so ironic because to me, that might be the it's only thing is wrong, but it might be the one thing. Like, he has a dude for X, Y, Z, all the way down through the alphabet. What he probably doesn't have a dude for is what you're describing. Like,
correct.
He is the dude.
Correct.
So to me, that is like the overwhelming thing that you should just be watching the last 3 minutes of every close game of that week and just saying, what would I have done? What did they do? And like that, like, to me, that's part of the game.
Bengals lost. Well, the Bengals should have beat the Steelers if they could have made an extra point, but it got blocked and they shanked a field goal. But once it got to the point, the Bengals were playing for a tie. The clock is running. They snapped it on a punt with 13 seconds to go when they could have let it run down to 1. They could have let it run down to 0 and taken a delay and still punted it in the end zone like they did. And they probably the Steelers might have had a long field goal, but I doubt it. But that 13 seconds is probably the difference between a tie and a loss.
No,
And in a
totally.
17-game regular season, that could mean the playoffs. That could mean home field in the playoffs. It's
Yes.
huge.
So
Because, and I'm sitting there watching it, and it was obvious to me because I watch how many games a weekend. They're like, well, they're going to let this run down, and then they snapped it, and I was like, what are they doing? But obviously, nobody on the Bengals bench was doing it.
So okay, millions of dollars. I would argue billions of dollars at stake. Really, I just can't imagine, because I agree with you. They're probably watching 90% game film and then 10% of like actual games and the flow of the game. Like actually like sitting down from start to finish and like watching a game. I agree. However, with that much money at stake, how has nobody told these people that like just you should just be watching 3-minute segments at the end of the games? And just like, do you think there are coaches that do that? And see, I can't wrap my head around.
Well, the other thing, and I see it at high school level all the time, like there's an aspect, like the Bengals did with the punt, there's an aspect where you're just not trying to score now. Montoursville won a football game a couple years ago, and I won't call out any schools because they're within our area. But it was late. They were backed up. It was tied, and you could tell, like, it's going overtime.
Right.
Well, instead of just running the ball, and they had, because of timeout situation, they could have essentially run the clock out.
Sure.
Well, they decided we're going to put together a 90-yard drive, and they tried to throw it on first down. Well, they threw it incomplete. Well, now at the time, Montoursville was going to get the ball back, and they had a short punt because it's high school, and the guy ran it back, and Montoursville kicked the field goal and beat them. And we had a game earlier this year when a team should have just taken a knee and gone to halftime. This boggles my mind too. They hand the ball off instead of just like accepting this is where we're at in the game. We should go to halftime. They hand the ball off and the kid fumbles. And you're like, well, if we hand it off, there's a chance he's going to run 75 yards for a touchdown. But there's also a chance he's going to fumble and we're going to give the ball to the other team.
Totally.
And all these things are clock-oriented game management.
Yes.
That you're just like,
but you're giving examples, and I feel like we're like, as a society, because football is part of American culture. I feel like as a culture, as society, we are past the example point, and now the discussion almost needs to be like, why? Like, how could 32 of the highest paid people in the world for this sport, for this thing, how is it that it's always so mismanaged?
Because I think. This is why. I think that the person who is, because you said 30 seconds goes so fast and calling plays is so fast, and you're not just, well, what should we run? Your immediate thought is, what are they going to do? What are their tendencies in this situation? What do I think they're going to do? Because before you call a play in football, you're mentally guessing what you think they're going to do to you. So while you only have so much time, so you also can't think of, should I run the ball? Should I throw the ball? Should I call it? What's the game situation? And that's why and then when you have two people, because Andy Reid, who's a brilliant Hall of Fame coach, has always been ridiculed for his bad clock management.
Sure.
Because he's so wrapped up in, well, we need to get 6 yards, but because of down and distance, should we just run the ball on first down and run the ball on second down just because it's better?
So here's my 3 things. First, I believe, because people have started to say this, I actually believe that you should almost have like, not a Madden specialist, but you should almost have somebody, like if I were the Chiefs, I would just hire one of the best Madden players in the world and just have him on a headset and just saying to us like, hey, like 2 timeouts, whatever, like the guy calls down, like we're going to run this pass play. He should be like in the headset with him, just being like, hey, just so you know, like this is what we're going to have to do if, like, because the weird part is like anybody who's played Madden or NCAA football religiously, that is what you are doing. It's all you're doing. So in a weird way, like it's possible. Like, I guess what I'm saying is this issue, this problem, it's not like it's this impossible thing and it's so far above the average fan's head. I think what makes this issue unique is the average fan kind of gets it because they do play Madden and they do play NCAA football. So in a weird way, they understand something that these dudes that are making millions of dollars to understand, it's just kind of like background fodder. Like it just kind of somehow within the week of preparation, it's just not there. Here's my last two things. Andy Reid probably, correct me if I'm wrong, I know he used to, calls the plays.
Yes.
Okay. Do you think there is an issue? Do you think if you're an NFL head coach, if you call the plays, are you too distracted? Is it too much to do both?
I think it certainly hurt Andy Reid, and he might be the best example.
Or vice versa, if you're not calling the plays, are you not in what's happening enough to be in the thick of it? It's almost like you have to trick yourself or jolt yourself in to the idea that like you are really into it. Because there's people who don't call plays, and it's almost like they don't. It's like it takes them a second to realize what's happening.
Well, the coach, I mean, the head coach obviously knows so much football that he knows everything about everything. But yeah, there are. It is a fascinating marriage there. That does, like a guy like John Harbaugh, who's the coach of the Ravens, who doesn't call anything. Does he go to the offensive coordinator and say, "Run it"? I don't care. Like, you're going to run the ball, or do they just step back and say, "I'm not going to let"? It'd be like going to a pitcher and say you're throwing fastball first pitch, and the pitcher's like, "Well, I don't want to throw fastball." Right. It's like, but
what I'm saying is, if you're John Harbaugh's a great example. If I'm John Harbaugh and I'm not calling the plays, I would make the assumption that he is thinking about the things that I am complaining about. Like, he is thinking about the clock. Or do I have it backwards that, like, because he's not calling the plays, there is like this idea that he's kind of like outside looking in, and thus you almost have to like, oh, like we're doing this or we're doing that, or like we should call it. So you're almost just far enough removed that instead of me thinking like you should be on top of this, maybe it's harder to be on top of it because you're not actually like
it. Maybe. And maybe
I don't know. It's wild to me that no one has really figured this out.
They haven't. And in some of the situations,
industry too.
In some of the situations, do they have like, as the offensive coordinator who studied, that's all he does. Yeah. Like, I know what they're going to do. I have something that I really think is going to work right now. I think I've out-schemed him for this play.
Right.
And now the head coach, does he not want to be the guy to step in and say, we got to run the ball? And he's like, oh, I was going to go play action, and we had it. Yeah. One of the great, I didn't love Bill Parcells as a coach. I think he's, obviously he's great. He's a Hall of Famer, but I thought he's a little overrated, but be that as it may. One of the, I heard someone ask him when he was broadcasting, 4th and 1, do you go for it here? Mm. And to a lot of us meatheads that sit on the couch, we're like, oh, you go for it. Sure. And it was borderline, like, should they go for it? Should they kick a field goal, or should they punt? It was right in that netherworld. Okay. And he's like, well, the first thing is, do I think I have a play that's going to get me a yard? Because I'm not hoping to get a yard. I need to have a play that I know is getting a yard.
Sure.
Well, now, if you're the head coach, but you're not the play caller, how much are you inclined with that, like the way things are going? And obviously, again, you know all that's going on, but you don't know it. So maybe it's hard, and the head coach has to make that decision. Mm-hmm. But now if he's asking the offensive coordinator, do we have a play that's going to get us a yard? What's the offensive coordinator say? Well, hell yeah, I'll get you a yard. That's my job to get you a yard.
Sure.
So it is fascinating. It's so complex that the simple aspect of clock management is still a mess.
Yeah.
But you're right. Baseball went to this. Baseball got away from, the old boys club with guys spitting in a spittoon all day. And they started bringing in these eggheads who started winning.
Sure.
And they're like, the way you look at it this way's better.
Sure.
It wouldn't shock me if a team went out and hired a Madden, some 29-year-old who's just, you're in charge of clock management. We will take timeouts when you tell us to take timeouts. We will take. But again, if you're the head coach, it's one thing about manipulating the draft and talking about trades. But do you want to be the head coach who loses his job because some 28-year-old kid who, lives in his mom's basement says take a timeout, and in hindsight it didn't work out?
But it's already not working out. That's the weird part.
I'm with you there.
It's already not really like working out.
But I would bet you if you go like not even just good football fans, are just as good as clock management as a lot of these guys because they never care about the clock. When they watch hours and hours and hours of film, but the clock doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. But to us, we always see the clock.
Sure.
It's like with coaching and playing. The basketball coaches see the clock and the score so much better. Like there's kids on the court who don't know the score.
Sure.
Because the ball just went in, you don't look up at the clock and be like, who's my guy? What am I in? And
basketball and football are so. I mean, baseball. The guy on third base for the Pirates was eating sunflower seeds while the guy was rounding third. Did you see that at all? Guy for the Pirates,
the third baseman.
Yes, he reached. The guy was for the Mets was rounding third, and it showed in slow motion, and the third baseman was watching the throw, and he went like this. And was as the guy for the Mets is rounding third to go home plate. So if that tells you anything about the sport of baseball, comparing it to football or basketball, I don't know.
That is awesome. I was playing first base once in a senior league game, and I bought at the concession stand between innings. I bought Swedish fish. They used to, when I was little, you used to go and they just used to count them out one by one. They were a penny a piece.
Okay.
So they were in a little brown bag. I folded it up and I shoved it in the palm of my glove. And so this kid I know, because we're playing he was younger than me though. He walks, he gets to first base, he's there. I pull it out, I put my glove, I open it up, I said, "Hey, you want a fish?" I mean, you would have thought I offered him a quaalude. He was like, "No, I can't." I was like, "Oh, okay, more for me." And I shoved it back in my glove.
Yeah. There's a real sport.
Good time. Hey, hardest thing to do in the world. Round ball, round bat.
We're about to.
You know who does it really well, by the way? Aaron Judge.
Yeah, he's okay. Anything else before we head out?
Yes. The Phillies picked a bad time to go cold.
No, they didn't. They just played the Braves.
Well,
it's not
did.
about being cold. The
Braves are good. Big week for the Phillies. Next week is soft. They get, I think, the Cubs and the Nats. But this week they have the Blue Jays, and then they have 4 more with the Braves, who they just lost 3 in a row to. So
10 of their last 24, I think, were against the Mets and the Braves. It was not. The schedule was not favorable to them.
Yes.
Stretch.
Next week they've got to survive this week. Phillies, if you're a Philly fan, big week, and also obviously if you're a Philly fan, then the Eagles are tonight. I think the Phillies are actually off tonight, which gives the Philadelphia fans a break because the Eagles and the Eagles try to avoid going 1-1 like every other team. The whole NFL is 1-1. And here would be the question.
Unless you're the Colts.
Well, that's true. I pose to you and I pose to football fans ever. Obviously, the Bills didn't play last night because they're tonight. But the Bills are good. The Chiefs didn't play last night because the Chiefs played Thursday. So of all the games that played yesterday, who's good?
Yesterday?
Like what team that you saw yesterday did you say that team is damn good?
Nobody yesterday.
Nobody.
The team that if you said to me who is I think Minnesota's really good.
Minnesota's going to be fun to watch tonight.
They didn't play yesterday.
They play tonight against Minnesota. Will be fun to watch tonight against the Eagles. I think it's a great game.
Yeah.
I think there's 2 good teams in the NFL. I think it's Buffalo and Kansas City and maybe Miami. Maybe, although they gave up 1,000 points.
I know, but Miami, I don't know.
I'm not sold on their quarterback, but getting the kid from Kansas City has changed their offense.
I said to my cousin, I don't want to take too long. I said to my cousin yesterday, there was this idea that if you had Kirk Cousins early on, he was never going to be a top 5 quarterback, which is probably still true. He probably still isn't a top 5 quarterback. But he wasn't one of the worst 15. You still had a quarterback that was one of the best 15 in the NFL.
He gave you a chance.
I think no one will ever compare him and Tua because they don't look alike. They don't play the same way. Nothing else. Tua to me feels the exact same way where people are going to trash him because he's not one of the best 5 quarterbacks in the league. And but if you have Tua, I think you could make the argument you don't have one of the worst 15. And I think him and Kirk Cousins are very comparable that way.
Maybe.
I think if you're you're going to have Dolphin fans that are Tua's going to drive them nuts. But at the same time, you're going to have one of the better QBs in the NFL.
He's also got real
weapons. If you cut it in half, I would argue Tua is one of the best 16 quarterbacks in the world.
And he's got real weapons for the first time. Before we go, Penn State obviously with a huge win, and it is happy times in Happy Valley.
When are we just going to say Auburn's not good anymore?
They didn't. They're not good right now.
When am I allowed to say that Auburn's not Auburn?
Well, they kind of come and go. but they're still. It's.
Just let me know.
I mean,
keep talking, but let me know when I'm allowed to say Auburn's.
Penn State so far, 3 weeks into the season,
Mm-hmm.
they've gone and won at Purdue,
Mm-hmm.
which Purdue's not going to the national championship game anytime.
No, but
soon.
they're solid.
But they went to Auburn to play, which is not a fun place to go play, and they kicked the crap out of them.
Sure.
So, like, they've kind of taken care of business for now. They have Michigan coming.
Yep.
They have Ohio State coming. They have enough. This weekend, Wisconsin and Ohio State.
Yeah.
I don't know if Wisconsin's any good, but it's a little bit of a test.
Sure.
So
it'll be interesting.
I don't know. It's they're happy.
This is the Penn State trap we've talked about before. Like,
well, this week they play
start
Central
off,
Michigan or whatever, which incidentally I think is where Cooper Rush went.
Yeah.
But that's not Cooper Rush's jersey, but you get the point. No, I mean it's the Franklin haters are quiet right now because they've done everything they've needed to do.
But Franklin is also good at this. Penn State's issue has never been the start of the season.
Well, except the year they went 0-6.
But that was COVID.
Yeah,
it was Micah Parsons didn't play.
They had guys opt out. I'm with you.
But he is usually real. They start off well, almost always. And so the question is like, is this the same? If you want it, because again, I'm pro Franklin. I think you're pro Franklin. If you're not pro Franklin, the one argument that you could make to me, and I'd be like, I have no dispute, is just that. Is like it by the middle of the season, whatever the magic was, whatever the thing was at the beginning of the year that helped them, has for whatever reason dissipated. It's no longer there.
If you are, but my argument would be, and I'm not I didn't go to Penn State. I'm not a Penn State guy per se. If you come into the season unranked and you've got 3 weeks into the season, you have one cupcake, which is probably one less than most people have this far. Mm-hmm. You have a win over a cupcake, but you have a road conference win and a road non-conference win against an SEC team, and you entered the season unranked. Yeah, that's a good start.
Yes,
that is a good start.
Yes, this is a vote. Thank you guys for watching Midday Show. Be sure to go to NorthcentralPa.com for all of your local news. That's it. We hope your Monday gets easier. I'm Jeff Everett. He's Mark Messina. We will see you guys tomorrow.
It has to now.
Can't get